This lecture is on the behavior consultation process, and what we're going to do is go through step by step what is involved during an interview with a consultee to solve behavior problems. We'll also go through a detailed task analysis of what is involved as you function as a behavioral consultant. So with that, let's begin with the first part. Okay, now, when you're working in the schools, you'll be, as a behavioral consultant, you'll be getting referrals one way or another, sometimes through formal channels, sometimes, through forms that are submitted and so forth, but more likely than not, a lot of your referrals will be from informal channels. For example, stopping off in the teacher's lounge and talking to teachers. Often when they find out who you are, they'll invite you to assist them with problems in their classroom. So my experience as a behavioral consultant in the schools has been that it's no problem to find work to do. You'll be inundated with work more likely. So there will be plenty of consultees to work with. So however that request for help might arrive, then you set up your meeting with the consultee. And so when you walk in, the first thing you want to do is establish rapport with that person. Something about maybe what their classroom looks like, or what's going on in their schools and so forth. Set them at ease. And after you've then established some rapport, then you're ready to begin with your interview process. So what you're trying to do we're going to look at 3 interviews first. We're going to look at the problem identification interview. That's where you're trying to find out what the problem is and how you can help the consultee, whether it's in a center or whether it's in a school or whatever. And then your next interview, a week or 2 later, will be concerned with solving the problem, helping the teacher or whoever develop a behavior intervention plan and get that going. And then the 3rd interview would be the problem evaluation interview. And what you're trying to find out here is, how did it all go? Was the intervention successful? If not, then what needs to be done to make the intervention successful? What changes might be needed? So going back now to the first interview, the problem identification interview, you want to find out first, is this really a serious problem? So suppose you have Joe and Bill sitting together in a classroom, and they're bickering. They're going back and forth and calling each other names and so forth. And so that's that's the nature of the request for help. So after informal observation or simply talking to the teacher, you might suggest, well, let's just try setting one kid in one side of the room and the other kid on the other side of the room. That might be the solution to the problem, and it's solved. So that was not a serious problem. But suppose you take one kid and you put him in next to somebody else, and he begins the same interaction with another peer. Well, then that begins to suggest that this is a serious problem, that more systematic intervention is called for. In that case, then we proceed. So we have we found out an informal solution did not. Maybe it did work, maybe it didn't work. If it wasn't solved, then we need to continue. If it was solved, then we can exit. In other words, we'll say, well, if you need help in the future, let me know. So suppose the problem was not solved then, and yes, it's a serious problem. In that case, then we begin by carefully identifying what the problem is. We're asking the teacher or the consultee specific questions to help identify what the real problem is. And one of the things that we often have to work through as behavioral consultants is the problem will often be expressed to you in general terms, often referring to some attitude or some hypothesized trait of the target individual. Well, he's just got a bad attitude and so forth. We can't work with that, of course. So we have to help define that behavior in observable and measurable terms. Okay? And then, when we get to that point, then we have to work with the consultee in developing a way to measure the behavior. Without data, we cannot proceed. So we need to accurately define the real behavior that's the problem, set up a behavior measurement system, and then set the consultant up to collect data for a week or so. Or in other words, to establish a baseline. All right? Then we come back for the second interview, the problem analysis interview, and after a hello and getting acquainted again, then focus in on the data that the consultee has collected, and of course give them positive comments on how well they collected data, if that's the case. You'll find that in some cases you return to, I found this out in working in public schools, is that there may not be data there for you. Teacher says, well, it's been so busy this week, I just haven't been able to collect any data. So you're sympathetic, but you leave it at this point. Okay, now when you do collect the data, give me a call and I'll come back. So without data, you can't proceed. And if the teacher never calls you back, then the teacher obviously wasn't interested in your services. So you go about your merry way with the next consultant. There's never a consultee. There's never a problem in finding another consultee to work with. Okay, so you analyze the data, and then together with the teacher or the consultee, you set objective. How much behavior do we want changed here? Whether the behavior is a target to increase or the target is to decrease the behavior. How much change would be successful in the consultee's view? So once that's established, then you begin to plan the intervention with the teacher. And we'll go through that in some detail, the steps involved. We don't want to do any planning for an intervention during the first interview. The focus there is to define the behavior and the circumstances in which it occurs and set up a system for measuring the behavior. But now, in the second interview, your task is to help the teacher develop an intervention plan. And then make sure that the teacher or consultee can implement the plan and can also continue with the data collection exactly as was done during baseline. Okay, so that's what goes on during the problem analysis interview. Then with that, you come back in a week or two, and then your problem evaluation interview takes place. And what you're trying to find out first with this third interview is, was the change acceptable? Was this successful? So you're evaluating the progress of the behavior intervention. And so what about that? Well, if the consultee said, well, no, he's not doing what he really needs to be doing, or he's doing too much, or she's doing too much of what she shouldn't be doing, whatever the behavior problem is, then you may have to, with the teacher, set new objectives. And if you do, or modify the intervention plan, and then proceed as you did before, making sure that the teacher, I'll refer to the teacher most often, but this applies to other settings as well, that the teacher can implement the plan and will continue with the data collection as before. So then suppose that you come to your third interview and the teacher says, yes, the change was acceptable. Well, you don't leave at that point and say, well, good luck with your program. You want to ensure that the success continues. You want to make sure that you have recommendations for that teacher to follow to maintain the desired behavior change. You want that improved behavior change to occur in other situations, like later on in the day or a different classroom. So you want to give recommendations on promoting the generality of the behavior change. And then you would leave, and then in a week or two, a follow-up. A follow-up could be merely a phone call asking the teacher how things are going and if more assistance is needed. Now, then it's a good idea at that point too, in your last interview, to ask if there's another problem that the teacher would be concerned about that you could work with teacher on. Okay, so is there a new problem? And I make it an ethical point that if the first behavioral change program involved decreasing an undesired behavior, then ethically you should focus on now improving a behavior, adding to the behavioral repertoire. So if there is a new problem, you simply recycle beginning with the first interview and going through all those steps again as we just went through. And if there is no new problem, that would be where you would exit, and then making sure that the teacher understands that you're available for assistance later. Okay. Now what we're going to do is go through the whole interview itself, the three different kinds of interviews, step by step. We're going to look at what your objectives would be, the steps involved, and what should be accomplished at the end. Okay, so going on with our problem identification interview. What goes on? Your objectives. Pinpoint the appropriate behavior to be changed, in other words, specified in observable and measurable terms. Arrange the conditions to make sure that there's accurate and reliable baseline data. Often you don't have the resources available in the classroom for a reliability assessment where somebody else can observe the behavior at the same time, and you can then determine inter-observer agreement. Sometimes you can do that. If you can do that, fine. For example, if there's an instructional assistant in the classroom that can do that and can observe the behavior at the same time as the teacher on a day or two, getting a reliable baseline would be very useful. But you could proceed without it if you needed to. Okay? And for the next interview, you don't want to go into details on that, but you might prompt, or you should prompt the consultee to begin to think about what might be done to improve the behavior. One thing that I mention is write down what you think that this student or whoever the target individual is would be interested in, would like to work for. In other words, you want to identify some potential reinforcers. Okay, then here are the steps for this first interview. Here are some, now these are, I have suggested questions, and you'll also find on Blackboard under the consulting process folder in the course documents section a interview guide that you can print out. Now this is simply a guide. I'm not recommending, in fact I would discourage you from reading the questions that I'm about to go through, and you should feel that you can be flexible with these suggested questions, and you can adapt them, and you should adapt them to the situation where you're working. Okay. So you would start out probably with what behavior seems to be causing the difficulty? What's the problem? Now, I want to emphasize that what you ask and how you ask is crucial, because if you ask the wrong kind of question, it can then derail your whole interview, or it can get you off on a tangent that will waste a lot of time. So I avoid saying things like, what is the problem with with Joe? And then that would often prompt a teacher to say, well, he's just being nasty in class. He's got a horrible attitude. And then they start going out in this direction. As long as they're talking about traits or assumed inner processes, agencies inside that are responsible for the behavior, you're getting nowhere, and you're wasting your time, and you're wasting the teacher's time if the real goal is to improve that behavior. So your question should be addressed to behavior. Whose behavior seems to be causing the difficulty? Okay, well, you want to know who you'll be working with. It could be an individual, it could be a couple of kids, it could be an entire classroom for that matter. So what does this person do or fail to do? Again, you're focusing on the behavior. Which behaviors need to be changed? So they might, at this point, after you ask what behavior is not happening, they may give you a whole laundry list of behaviors. So your task then would be to sort those out and put them in priority. What should we work with first? Now, it could be that what the teacher comes up with may not be the one behavior that you would pick out first. So again, you've got to use your judgment in what is the real problem here, and be diplomatically persuasive in getting the teacher on course with what needs to be done. So it could be that the kid is talking out, well, what's going on here? Maybe the kid is done with the assignment, is bored, and for something better to do, starts talking to peers. Well, the problem isn't talking out. The problem is the kid doesn't have the appropriate work. So those are things you really need to look for. So then you want to then prioritize the target behavior, what to work on. And so what the teacher does suggest may be quite the thing to work with, or it may not be. Again, you have to use your judgment from your knowledge of behavior that you've learned in previous coursework in ABA. So then you want to see what seems to be setting the occasion, in our technical terms, what seems to be occasioning the behavior. In other words, what seems to set it off, what seems to evoke the behavior, or it could be a behavior that's desired that seems to be inhibited. So what's encouraging the behavior, or if it's not occurring, what seems to be stymieing the behavior. So you're looking at the antecedent variables here, antecedent variables. Now you want to look at the postcedent variables, what's happening right after the behavior. So what are the consequences, or judging on your estimate of the teacher's knowledge in with behavioral procedures. You say, well, what happens right after this behavior? What do others do? What do you do? So again, you have to adjust your level of simplicity or sophistication to your estimate of how well the teacher understands behavioral interventions or behavioral procedures. Okay, now I always try to make it open to the teacher's suggestion of what to do, or the consultee, because if it's something that they already want to do, they're more likely to buy into what the procedure should be and follow through. And sometimes you get very good suggestions on how to measure and record a behavior, how it should be observed, what is it, how it should be measured. And in other cases, they may have no clue at all, and so then you would have to take them step by step on how to define the behavior and how to record it. Okay. So what kind of record keeping should we use? Again, they might have a good idea, or if not, you're going to help them with that. Now, sometimes they might want to have an instructional assistant or someone else do the behavior measurement, and so you would want to say, will you be doing that, or will someone else be observing the behavior? And if the observer is not the consultee, then you want to make sure that this other individual will do an effective job of assessing the behavior. How will you make sure that person understands what to look for and how to record and measure the behavior? Okay. And then at this point, the suggestion of what might the child work for, or the target work for, what are the interests? You're trying to find out potential reinforcers here. And then leave kind of an open suggestion of let's think of some ways to change behavior when we get together again. And then how do you know if your first interview has been successful? These are the markers to indicate whether your interview is successful. Make sure the baseline was measured, and it'll be there for you on your next interview. In some cases, it may be a difficult problem, and you'll have to actually go in and do a functional behavior assessment to see what the nature of the problem is. What motivating operation might be keeping this behavior going and so forth. So the task of doing a functional behavioral assessment will probably be your responsibility, because there probably won't be that many teachers who really know how to do an effective FBA. So then it's good to have graph paper. You can buy at any bookstore, and actually draw the dimensions, the vertical and horizontal scales, and label them. You want to make it as set the situation, set the stage so that there's a high likelihood that you're going to get the baseline measurement when you come back. So then one good thing is to set up that graph and show them how to observe and record the data, put it on the graph. Okay, and then you set your appointment time for the next meeting, for the next interview, the problem solving interview, and that's what should have been accomplished. And then make sure that you copy the definition and a description of the recording system. Why? Because you will need to develop a behavior consultation report. And when I worked in the public schools, that was my accountability. For every case I worked on, there was a behavior consultation report. We're going to be looking at that in a bit. But you need that information to incorporate into your report. And of course, for the purpose of this course, you'll be writing behavior consultation reports. Okay, now going on to the second interview, the problem analysis interview. So remember there, we analyze the data, and then we look at it, and then we set objectives, and then with the teacher, then we work with the teacher to develop a behavior intervention plan, and making sure before we leave that that intervention plan will be carried out appropriately, and that data will continue to be collected as it was during baseline. So the objectives on the second interview are to evaluate the quality of the baseline, and it could be that the behavior was not sufficiently defined, for example, and there was this the measurements are not trustworthy. Perhaps there was even reliability assessment, and you've got reliability of like 60% or 70%, and that's useless. You throw that away, and you have to start all over again. So you have to say to yourself, can I really trust the baseline data here? Is that really what the situation is here with that behavior? And if you can't, then you need to recycle and go. In other words, go back to the problem identification interview and set that up again with an improved definition, an improved measurement system, and so forth. Okay? Then develop the appropriate intervention plan with the teacher or the consultee. Again, I keep saying with the teacher. It's important to understand that you're a team. It's one of the things I learned early on when I started serving as a behavioral consultant in school, that it's important to stress collaboration, and you both have your areas of expertise. You have your expertise in applied behavior analysis. The teacher has his or her expertise in being familiar with the target individual, the student, and the situation, and so forth. So you put your knowledge base together with that teacher's knowledge base to work to collaborate as a team. It's always a team approach. So you don't come across, and this is what my early lesson, as the expert. The teacher is an expert too. Okay, then you arrange conditions to make sure that there's continued measurement of behavior, and then the behavior intervention plan is implemented reliably. Okay, so here are the steps then. Now, what you're going to find here are terms that you'll not be familiar with yet. The next step in this course will be the verbal interaction coding system. And what this coding system is all about is a fine-grained analysis of what you say to the consultee, what that consultee says back to you. And see, that our job as behavioral consultants is not to modify the behavior of the target individual or the student. Our job is to modify the behavior of the consultee in such a way that it improves the behavior of the target individual. So our task is to modify, to improve the effectiveness of the teacher's behavior. And there's only one way we can do that, and that's through our skillful verbal interaction with the teacher or consultee. So how we ask questions, what we ask, when we ask them are crucial. And the verbal behavior interaction coding system will allow you to focus in on each utterance. Is that an appropriate utterance or not? So we're defining the verbal behavior that's effective for productive behavior consultation programs. So you'll not understand at this point what behavior setting specification elicitor is, and there will be some other terms popping up here. What I want you to do is, after you go through the next unit and you take your verbal behavior interaction coding system test and pass it, and eventually you will, because it's you either get, there's kind of two scores. You either get pass it, and that's 90%, or if not, you have a learning opportunity. You get to remediate and take it over again. And when you do pass it, then I want you to come back to this part of the PowerPoint that's on Blackboard and read through these steps. So then you'll understand what behavior setting specification elicitors are and so forth. And this will be much more meaningful to you at that point. Okay, so what you're trying to do here is identify antecedents and postcedents of the behavior, sequential conditions that affect the desired behavior change. Okay? And then follow these with what we call behavior setting summarization emitters, and that's the other part of the verbal interaction coding system, the sequence you go from one part to another and so forth. And you'll see how it all flows together. Okay? And then you conclude with validation as elicitors. Again, that's confirming what, the accuracy and the appropriateness of what you talked about. And you'll see how all of this fits together once you go through the verbal interaction coding system and you pass the test. So then come back to here, if you will. Okay, so from there then, here are the questions. So did you think that this system was workable in your classroom? Was it appropriate? Again, these questions are only suggestions, and you can use them as a guide as you go through. You can print out a copy if you wish and have them right with you. When you do your first interview, you'll find out that maybe the second interview you might have to refer to it occasionally. By your third interview, typically you've got it down so well that you don't need to refer to it at all. It all fits together in a very logical sort of way. So would this be typical of the kids' behavior during the week? The behavior that's on the graph that might be important to look at. At the end, you want to know about the antecedents, what's happening before, what's happening after, the postcedents, what's going on in the room, and if a functional behavioral assessment was needed, then look for possible controlling variables. You might have spent some time observing the classroom, or through your interview you can go into further detail on that. And that's one, of course, as you learned in the introductory course, in the functional behavioral assessment, one of the tools we use is an interview. Of course, you might want to do a scatter plot to see when during the day it is. You might, and an ABC analysis, of course, if you were doing this, if you needed to go into the classroom or wherever and observe yourself, you want to do an ABC assessment. If you have the resources to do a functional behavior analysis where you actually manipulated the variables, but often we don't have those resources. Okay. After observing the child in this past week, did you notice any patterns that we were not aware of last time when we talked? Might be an appropriate question at that time. So from what we've observed and what we've thought about since our last meeting, do you have any ideas of how we can improve this situation? And just like with the measurement system, if the teacher has an idea of how to improve the behavior and it's acceptable from an ethical standpoint, then why not try it out? Especially if the teacher is kind of sold on what he or she came up with. If it's not workable, you're going to find out. And when you come back again, the teacher is going to, and finds out that the teacher discovers that that intervention wasn't really working, that teacher is going to be predisposed to listen to your suggestions very carefully. Oops. Oh boy, hold on a second. Let me do a fast forward here. Okay. Okay, here we are. Often, though, if a teacher doesn't have a concrete idea of what to do for an intervention, then they'll be very interested in what you have to suggest. And again, try to make it as simple and as straightforward and as easy to implement as possible. It's easy to come up with elaborate intervention plans, but very little chance of having those being implemented. So again, that would be a waste of time. So make sure it's practical and the teacher understands how to do it. And so now you're trying to find out about the reinforcers. What does the kid like to do? What kind of things would the kid like to earn? What activities does the kid particularly like, and so forth. So you're getting a list of possible reinforcers. Then use this information, and then you say, how might we be able to work out this behavior change plan? And then use that information. Okay, pretty straightforward, right? Okay, now, how do you know if your problem analysis interview, your second interview, has been successful. Well, let me back up. This is what you want to accomplish. We're going to look at what needs to be done in a bit. Okay, you want to make sure that you have note on the baseline performance. What did the baseline look like? So make a note on that. If a functional assessment was done, then you might have to go through the needs assessment identification again. So now you've agreed upon the intervention plan. Then write down step by step what the intervention plan would be. And it should be so specific that potentially that plan could be given to another teacher, and that teacher could follow those steps and carry out the same intervention. Think in terms of this way. Suppose the teacher in the middle of the week got sick and couldn't be there, and a substitute came in. Could a substitute go through this behavior intervention plan and follow it and carry it out just as the teacher has been carrying it out successfully? That's how detailed the behavior intervention plan should be. It should be step by step. So you want to make a copy of this for yourself as well, because you're going to incorporate this information into your behavior consultation report. Okay, and again, you want to make sure that the observer continues to measure and record the behavior, just like was done during baseline. Can't stress that strongly enough. If there's any change in the measurement during the intervention, then that information is useless. You can't go by it if the definition has been changed or the measurement system has been changed. So that's crucial. Okay, and make sure that the behavior change agent can implement that plan reliably and exactly as specified, assuming that the intervention was appropriately specified. Then, at the end, you set up your time for the third interview, the evaluation interview. Okay? So here, with the problem evaluation interview, you're trying to find out whether the change was acceptable. So you evaluate progress here. So if you and the teacher conclude that it really wasn't acceptable, not enough improvement here, may be appropriate to adjust the objectives, or if the behavior wasn't really the problem behavior, to modify or redefine the behavior. Then from that, go through the steps of revising the intervention plan and how it will be implemented, and of course making sure the data collection will continue. And so you just recycle through that. Now, if the consultee says, yes, that was an acceptable change, then make sure that you give concrete, and it should be highly recommended that you write these down, concrete recommendations for making sure that behavior is maintained, that improvement is maintained, and concrete suggestions and how to get that improved behavior to occur during the rest of the day, or in other classrooms, or at home, or wherever. And again, in a week or two, call back to see how things are going, a follow-up. Okay, so with the objectives then, you determine whether or not the problem has been solved adequately. You want to make sure that the consultee is now independently functioning. And probably I should rephrase this, terminate the consulting relationship. Well, it's not. That sounds too severe. You gradually phase yourself out, and assuring that you are available in the future if your assistance is desired. Okay, then it's really very important to collect all the necessary documentation, the intervention data, and also your suggestions for recommendations for maintaining the change in the desired change in the behavior, and how to get that desired change to occur in other situations. Your maintenance generalization parts of the program. So here, examine and ask whether the data the consultant asked about, well, whether that was a successful intervention and the problem has been remediated. Provide the consultee with a plan for promoting, we're reviewing now, promoting the maintenance and generalization. And if it has not been remediated, revise the intervention plan and recycle through the needs analysis interview. And if the plan involved reducing a problem behavior, prompt the consultee to now consider a constructive goal. That's from an ethical standpoint. And our goal, well, let me just say this. If our purpose as behavioral consultants in the schools or wherever was simply to reduce undesired behavior, what we're doing is taking the technology of behavior change and using it as a way to oppress children. You know, there's no great accomplishment simply to stop a behavior. Our business in education and in providing services to clients or whatever is to give people more skills so that they can be more successful in life. Is to enhance the behavioral repertoire, not to limit behavior. Okay? So that's why we stress this, positive goals. Of course, if it's a problem behavior and it's a serious problem behavior and it's interfering, or especially when it's dangerous to oneself, to the child, or to the target individual, or to someone else, then that's what you focus on first, but you don't stop there. So then you ease out your service, making sure the consultee understands that further assistance is available if needed. And now, here's how you can tell whether you're successful or not with that third interview. So when you're phasing yourself out, get a copy of a behavioral graph, an accurate description of the intervention, a note about the promotion and maintenance of the behavior and generality of behavior change. And then that information is incorporated into the behavior consultation report. Give one copy to the consultee, save one for your own records. Then you have to make this a decision on whether to put a copy in the child's cumulative folder or in the records at the school by this one criterion only. Would it be helpful for this child in the future to have that behavior consultation report in the child's folder? If it would be helpful for that child, fine, you should put it in there or make sure the teacher does. If not, definitely don't put it in that folder. So then we have the overall schematic of what's involved in behavioral consultation. So each time you do this, you'll be going through these steps. And so I made it also in black and white so you could print it out. Oh, here's something I wanted to add. At this point, if there's a new problem, you recycle through the whole thing. If not, you phase yourself out. And there's the overall schematic of what's involved, the task analysis and flow chart for behavioral consultation. So good luck with your projects, and I hope you'll learn a lot from them. Okay?